Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and him, Aaron Stokes. Coming up on today's show, we'll talk about the exit of Callum Wilson, the latest with Anthony Elanga and why Newcastle United still haven't got their man. Plus, there's a new deal for one of United's 1,200 goalkeepers. What does it mean for the others? We'll have a look at the search for a new sporting director, the appointment of a set-piece coach, and some changes to your season ticket as well. All that to come, plus some fantastic questions sent in by you guys. It's all brought to you by Saily, the go-to place for an eSIM, which will keep you connected when you are abroad. It's affordable and secure. Hit the link in the podcast description box for a discount on your eSIM. Aaron, you well? You good?
Yeah, good. It just feels like deja vu, doesn't it? Every week we come on here, we think by the time we come on next Monday, we're going to have someone to talk about, a shiny new signing. And yet again, we don't.
Panicking yet?
No, of course not.
I'm nice and calm. I'm also feeling chipper because I had a bout of gout last week and I couldn't bend my big toe, and I'm recovered. I feel like I could tap dance across the Tyne Bridge.
Good. I'm sure the listeners are delighted to hear about that.
Well, I'm sure someone listening might be able to relate as a 30-something suffering from gout. Maybe I'm the only one on Tyneside that does. But anyway, now I just need a sign-in to further boost my mood.
Yeah, we certainly do. I think obviously we're recording this on Monday. Newcastle United's first team squad are now back, or the bulk for them are back now to work with Eddie Howe and get prepared for the season. Eddie Howe, obviously, when he came out and spoke after Everton, said speed was the key, and I suspect he would have thought coming back for pre-season this morning they would have at least one through the door. They haven't. The key thing now is to get them through the door before they go to Austria, before they play Celtic, and before they obviously crucially go over to Asia.
How will Eddie Howe be feeling, you think, this morning as he rocks back up to Benton and he hasn't got that signing through the door?
Look, I think no doubt probably there's a sense of frustration, but I don't think there's anything he can do. He'll know that the club have been working, and I think there'll just be a professional as ever response from Eddie Howe, and that is, we're going to work with the players that we've got, and I think as long as he knows that work is being done behind the scenes, I don't think he'll be too upset. I think it's interesting. I was looking at some quotes from last December, so 6-7 months ago now, and Eddie Howe was talking about how, squads can go stale when they're not freshened up. And I think if you're thinking that in December, God knows what you're thinking now that we're in July.
Well, we're going to talk more about transfers later in the show, but we'll start with today's big news, and that is the exit of Callum Wilson from Newcastle United. After 5 seasons, 49 goals, Wilson departs the club on a free transfer. Newcastle had offered him a pay-as-you-play deal, but that was rejected, and it's been confirmed today that Wilson has left. Initial thoughts on that deal, Aaron? Or that news, rather?
My initial thoughts is that it's the correct decision. I think a lot of fans will agree with that. Obviously, there is sort of a tinge of sadness there. I don't think we can probably call him a club legend, but he was certainly a hero of Newcastle United. He's an iconic player who joined the club when they were in a little bit of a pickle, scored some fantastic goals when Newcastle were fighting at both ends of the league. As I say, a good decision, I think one that probably suits all parties. And I think he's probably leaving now before his reputation gets tarnished. I think if we'd seen another season of Callum Wilson, who is getting no younger at 33, is maybe not the goal scorer that he once was, maybe those injuries are catching up with him. I think, as I say, that reputation and that legacy that he's got might have been tarnished. But whereas now we can say, look, 5 great years, 49 goals, and he leaves on somewhat of a high.
Yeah, I think if Newcastle were able to, they should have moved on last summer. I think it was a massive gamble to go into the season just gone with just Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak as their pro strikers, as it was. Wilson missed quite a few games, didn't he? And we probably saw the reason why. I say that, though, Newcastle did try and get him to stay. I mean, that is the bottom line, and we can say it's the right time for him to go. I can say I wanted him to leave last summer because injuries caught up with him, but the facts are Newcastle United wanted to keep him, yes, on a pay-as-you-play deal, which would have been the right terms had that a deal been agreed. I mean, can you share some light on that? Why do you think Newcastle United did try their best to keep him at the club?
Look, Eddie Howe trusts Callum Wilson implicitly, and really, really rates, as we know, as we're going to talk about with John Ruddy in a moment, really rates these type of leaders in the dressing room. Now, Callum Wilson certainly was that, and I think if he had gone on to a pay-as-you-play deal or a deal with incredibly reduced terms that would have made sense financially for Newcastle, we probably would have seen him playing more of a role like Jamal Lascelles, like John Ruddy at the club. Of course, we will go on to talk about whether Newcastle United need to replace Callum Wilson, which they obviously do. It would have been very interesting to see what they would have done if Wilson had stayed. But do you think that they had enough in attack? But look, this should come as no surprise. I think even when Callum Wilson was sort of, tearily saying farewell at the end of the season, Everton, Eddie Howe came straight out and said, look, it's not a done thing yet, and we will sit down and we will have talks. And as I mentioned, it's because we know how much Eddie Howe rates and really admires these players who can offer just as much off the pitch as they can on the pitch.
And maybe a nod as well that they don't have an endless amount of money to spend this summer. But for me, Wilson is one of the finest goal scorers that I've seen in my lifetime at Newcastle United. My only regret, Aaron, is that we didn't get to see more of him. He missed 114 games over the last 5 years, or 677 days through injury, meaning he managed just 130 games for the Magpies. And when we talk about what might have been at Newcastle United, I think Callum Wilson's injuries are up there at the top of the list. He finished on 49 goals. I mean, that number in itself winds me up because I like a nice round number. I know a few people watching live have also mentioned that. But I genuinely think if he didn't have that injury record and he wasn't plagued by injuries, we would be talking about him well over 100 goals for Newcastle United. I genuinely think he's up there with some of the best names we've seen in black and white. He had pace, read the game really well. Some of the runs he would make, just absolutely delightful. And his finishing was up there with, like I say, some of the best strikers we've seen at Newcastle United. Goals against Everton stand out. That lovely curling effort against Jordan Pickford. There was an overhead kick against Crystal Palace. But he was a man who could score every type of goal. Good in the air, strong, pacey, good either close range, long range. Didn't really matter. Just a top striker, played by injuries. I said a few weeks ago, Aaron, that he was in good company. I did mention Les Ferdinand as one of the strikers that I would put him up next to and got a bit of stick for. But I stick by it in terms of ability, what could have been. I mean, what do you make of his time at Newcastle?
Yeah, look, I agree with all that. And I think, we can only imagine how many goals he would have scored if he had stayed fit. The one thing that always stood out for me, and I've mentioned it on this podcast, loads of times, I've wrote about it today. The thing that always admired me about Callum Wilson is his ability to bounce back from these injuries. I mean, 2 ACL injuries at Bournemouth. He comes to Newcastle. 1 ACL injury enough is sometimes enough to end the career of some players, and yet he bounced back from 2. And every time he would pick up these knocks, as frustrating as they were, 1, he would show fantastic professionalism off the pitch to get back as quick as he could, and 2, he always used to come back, and maybe up until recently, he used to come back as if he'd never missed a beat. And his ability to just get straight back into the sort of rhythm of Premier League football always used to really impress me. Undoubtedly one of the finest goal scorers Newcastle United has ever had. And as you say, there is just that tinge of, what could have been if he'd had, the injury record of someone who can actually stay fit season after season.
Oh, definitely. Because to wear the number 9 shirt in the way that he did, that is a shirt that bears huge responsibility, and not a lot of players can handle that. Some really do struggle to put that shirt on their back, but he did it with relative ease as well. And when he had the chance, when he was fit, there were really few better, I think, in the last generation, maybe, as good as him. And I know we say that with like Alexander Isak next to him, but I'm talking about out and out number 9s.
And I think the thing that people probably forget is that when he joined Newcastle United, I mean, this team was really pretty bad. And, that's no disrespect to the players that were in it, but essentially you had Callum Wilson, you had Alan St-Maximin, who were the only 2 real pieces of talent in that team who could actually go forward and score your goals. So the fact that he scored so many in that team under Bruce was credit to him as well. And, quite easily with those injuries that we've just mentioned and with the rate of progression at Newcastle, he could have quite easily been left behind when Alexander Isak comes in, when all these big name players come in. But actually, he kept pace up until pretty recently and didn't really look out of place in a team that was challenging for Champions League qualification.
Do you think he's rejected Newcastle's offer of pay-as-you-play because he thinks he's got more to offer? Because interesting, in that podcast with Jake Humphries, the High Performance podcast, he did make a reference to the fact it's not really about the money anymore. And yet we're sitting here, Wilson is gone, and you can only assume if he said that and you take it at face value that he's gone because he thinks he can play first team football elsewhere.
I think, look, there's when you're a person like Callum Wilson, fantastic goal scoring record, huge self confidence, very, very good looking man. He got it all. He, personally is a very, very cocksure person. He really does back himself. He trains professionally off the pitch. He reads the game really well. He's a great student of the game. He will be sitting there thinking, I don't want to be third choice striker. Yes, it's at a team that are in the Champions League. Yes, it's at a team where I'm settled in that I've called home for the last half a decade. He will want one last stab at the age of 33 of actually going to another team and performing, and he will back himself to do it, despite what we may think about his injury record or whatever. You can guarantee he will have plenty of offers this summer. And I think it's fascinating actually to think, where is he going to go? So the only sort of links I've seen tentatively thrown about on the internet the last couple of hours are teams like Wrexham.
Surely. Burnley links.
Burnley. Could you see him going? Well, Leeds have been obviously quite heavily linked.
I think the only thing that
what's his level these days? That's the question.
If fit Callum Wilson could still do a job for this Newcastle United,
but that's the big thing, isn't it?
But you can't rely on his fitness, and I think that's the one thing that makes a move to a Leeds or a Burnley just that little bit unlikely, because he's going to command a big wage, probably a big sign-on fee. Okay, you're not paying an actual transfer fee, but there's still a lot of money there being spent. And it's kind of, you're massively gambling because you need that striker to be fit and to score goals. That's how you stay in the Premier League. And as we've seen over the last few years, Callum Wilson just cannot be that man. So it's all good if you've got another striker to rely on. But for these teams, paying that wage of Callum Wilson, he would be their number one choice. And if he gets injured 4 games in and then he's out for 20-odd games, their chance of survival, they take a massive blow, don't they? So I just don't think a promoted side or a team battling for safety will take the gamble unless they've got a backup.
It's interesting, isn't it? I could see him at any one of those teams we've mentioned. I could see him at Leeds. I could see him at a Burnley. I could even, weirdly, I could also, if they've got the money to do it, I could see him at a Wrexham, because what a statement that would be in the Championship. I could also maybe see MLS. I could also maybe see Saudi. I think there's options for him.
And you could see him in the MLS where it's not as competitive, not as physical, maybe. But how would he hold up on that kind of grass is maybe another question. But he's still got something to offer a team. And I hope wherever he goes, he gets much more game time than we've seen in the last few years. And then he can finish his career on a high. We've got people in the comments just offering Callum Wilson their best. Plenty of positivity. Graham says, love Callum, and we should all remember his time, his goals, and will be one of our greatest number 9s. And that's echoed by quite a few people who are watching live on YouTube. The question now, I guess, Aaron, is what next for the number 9 shirt?
I'd be really, really interested to know what people are going to say about this in the comments and listening. I think personally, as weird as it sounds, I don't think I want Alexander Isak to take the number 9 shirt.
I don't think he'll take it. I think it may well not be on show for the new season. I think it might be vacant.
Really?
Because I don't think Alexander Isak.
But do you think? Do you think if they sign a Callum Wilson replacement, they get it? I mean, personally, I know it's obviously hypothetical because it's not going to happen. But if Newcastle United had signed João Pedro, I could have seen him taking the number 9. But I don't know. There's just something with Isak and 14. I don't know if Isak will want the number 9 shirt.
It's got to be a big name to take that shirt. I think they will learn lessons. As daft as it sounds, I think they'll learn lessons from what happened with Joe Linton. Wasn't the right character to take it. Obviously, his goal scoring record didn't, kind of warrant that shirt. And I think they'll look back and not make the same mistake again, because it can be, an anchor around the neck for many players. I could see it vacant, which the only thing that in my head says you're going to be wrong on that, Andrew, is that marketing-wise, that would be a very bad move, because the number 9 sells shirts, but at the same time, it needs to be a number 9 on a striker with certain pedigree. Now, the strikers that I think Newcastle will be looking at this summer, even the likes of Liam Delap to a degree, would he have really been given the number 9 shirt? I don't think he would have done. I think the level of striker they'll bring in this summer to battle with Alexander Isak won't warrant the number 9 shirt. So I can see it being vacant, which, to my knowledge, has only happened in recent times. Did it happen in that Championship season for when we got promoted in a Chris Shooting? Because then Carroll took it, didn't he, in the summer? But anyway, I don't think it's happened too often, and it would be a big miss. But you've got to sign the right player for it.
Yeah, look, as I say, I'd be really, really interested to know what the comments are saying about it, because there will be a lot of people saying, give it to Isak, give it to Isak.
Well, I'll go down and have a look at the comments. But I'll do that. Have you got Callum Wilson's statement there, Aaron? Because he has put a statement out on Instagram just after the club announced the news that he was going. And there's a lovely video that's gone alongside it with the song that he gets sung from the terraces, accompanying a lot of goals that he scored. What's Callum Wilson said to the fans?
Yeah, Callum Wilson announcing his exit at lunchtime said, "To all you Magpies, it's time to say goodbye after an unbelievable few years in the tune. Thank you for everything. We stood strong together through the highs and some lows to help the club experience some new heights. I am so proud to have worn the iconic number 9 shirt and to have added a little bit more history to it, scoring at the Gallagher, and really is as special as they all say. All good things must come to an end, and there's no doubt Newcastle will always have a place in mine and my family's hearts. Thank you for the memories, CW9."
Lovely. Well, he leaves, obviously, with that goal scoring record, with a winner's medal, Carabao Cup, but also he was the last person to kick the ball in the final before the whistle went. And I've been saving that for many, many months, not to mention it.
Yeah, great stuff.
He kicks the ball up top, and then the whistle goes, and that's when everyone runs on. Willis Sula throwing his jacket in the air. So Callum Wilson can go away with that. And I think he'll look back on his time, he's mentioned it then in his kind of statement, he'll look back on it fondly. Yeah. And yes, there's been some criticism over the last kind of year or so, but I think most of it has been warranted, because he will be just as frustrated as those who have criticised his injury record. But I think it's all been done with the right feeling. You know, we wanted to see more of Callum Wilson. We've grown frustrated because we couldn't. We've seen how it's maybe impacted Newcastle and Alexander Isak because they haven't got the options of the competition. But I think overall he'll look back very happy with what he achieved on Tyneside. Like I say, 49 goals and a cup. I mean, Champions League football as well. It's all right, isn't it?
It's the right time to go. And as I said at the very start of this sort of segment, I think it's better for him to go now and be remembered like this, and for all us to be talking really, really fondly about his time at the club, rather than having another year of maybe not being able to keep up with the game, maybe of that reputation just taking a little bit of a dint because he's not at the peak of his former powers. So I think it's the right time for all parties.
Yeah, we've got some comments in on the number 9 shirt debate, and Roger says it deserves a regular player, and Nobby says surely it gets offered to Isak if he wants to stay. Surely the iconic number 9 is a must. Others have said that Isak won't want it, says Blockhead, and he might be gone in a year, not with changing his number. A lot of people reference the fact that he has worn number 14 prior at other clubs as well. Shez says the number 9 won't be pushed on Isak. Eddie will understand the psychological of a striker playing without unnecessary pressure. A lot of people are saying, please don't give it to Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Give it to Willis Sula.
Give it to Willis Sula. He'd wear it very nicely, I think. And that is the next question, is where they go now. I hope they avoid Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Please do not sign him. But it is a link that won't go away. But it's such a difficult market to shop in. And as we're seeing at the moment, Newcastle are really struggling to get any deals done. A deal for Elanga, which we will go into in a moment, does offer another option up top if we're desperate. But I really want to see Newcastle United avoid using their best wingers in that position. I want that to just end. Just don't do it. I think we both agreed they needed, or at the moment, now Wilson's gone, they need a senior striker and maybe a younger striker, or someone with a bit more experience who maybe comes in on a free to fill that gap temporarily. Who that is, I've got no idea, but I think we did both agree early in the summer that even if Wilson stayed, they still need to go out and get a senior striker. So what do they do now?
They for me, absolutely 100% need to get somebody in to fill that void. And I agree with you. I don't think Anthony Elanga is that man, because I think when Anthony Elanga arrives, I think he needs to be the only competition for Jacob Murphy. That is his position out on the right. Yes, he can play on both flanks. Yes, he can play through the middle. He played through the middle just as recently as last month for Sweden when Alexander Isak and Victor Gyökeres weren't playing. So he can do that. And that is obviously an added bonus and a big tick as to why Newcastle are going to, potentially get the deal done for him. But for me, there needs to be, as you say, somebody who we know, right, they are the backup to Alexander Isak. João Pedro would have been the absolute ideal for that because he, would have been such a good backup. Obviously, we know it would have been a lot of money. Where they go next, we don't know. As you say, those Dominic Calvert-Lewin rumours won't go away. don't suspect that would be a very popular deal on Tyneside, although it would make a lot of financial sense for the club. And that's the big question now. A lot of money going to be spent on Anthony Elanga. James Trafford is not going to come cheap. That is already close to 90 million, you suspect, for both of them. Then you factor in that they are going to, potentially bring in a centre-back as well. That's going to take you well over the 100 million mark. And as we've said plenty of times on this podcast, without a lot of sellable assets, if you're then going out and spending 50 million, 60 million on a João Pedro type second striker who isn't guaranteed to play, you're already going up to what, close to 200 million before you've even sold any players.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And I think we can say they need a senior pro and then either a youngster or someone to come in on a free who's a bit older. But then I say, well, name me those people. And it's very difficult, which shows you maybe why there's a little bit of issue within the transfer summits that they supposedly have. But for me, I'd take a risk on Tulu Akudere of Genk. I've mentioned him before. This week he's been linked with a move to Manchester United, previously to Fulham, previously to AC Milan. Wouldn't break the bank, but has real pedigree. 21 goals last season. The only negative would be that you'd likely lose him to AFCON next year, but you'd get him for £30 million, I would think, and then you could look to promote within. I think which would work, and you're not spending a huge outlay. It's still a lot of money, 30 odd million quid, but it's not the 60 odd million you were spending on João Pedro, which come with maybe a bit more of an expectation of first team football, even despite the fact that Isak was ahead of him.
It's the big debate that we've been talking about so often at centre back, isn't it? Do you go out and get Premier League proven players to fill these positions, but you're paying twice the price, or do you go to Europe and this counts for the striker position as well at the back? Do you take a risk on somebody like that, knowing that they've never played Premier League football? They're young, they're scoring goals, but they're scoring goals. No disrespect for them in the Belgian top league. But as we've said lots on this podcast in the last couple of weeks, there's so much value to be had, and maybe it is just worth taking a risk on players like that. I mean, you look at the likes of, who was it last season? Garusi, he was at Stuttgart, £50 million release clause. Newcastle really, really heavily linked with him. He's gone to Dortmund and he's absolutely turned it on there. So these risks can pay off sometimes.
I think for me, ideally, and I know I'm in the minority when I say this, I want Premier League experience. I think that really does lend itself to what Eddie Howe wants as well. Not exclusively, but I think it's something he likes. But I think the striker position is probably the hardest one to fill of all that. I think you can go out and you can get a right-sided, a right winger who's got that experience. We've seen them linked in Burmo, and then it's Elanga, and there's other names, and you can do that pretty much across the board, really, for what I would say isn't the worst price. And I know people are kicking up a fuss about 55 million, 60 million for Elanga, but I don't think that's the worst price in the world. Whereas you look at the striker market and you go, Premier League experience, like the cost, and who's also going to come in and play a second fiddle to Isak. And that's the other big glaring difference, isn't it? That we know that whoever comes in at right wing and whoever probably comes in at centre back is going to be first choice. So it's a little easier to sell than it is to even a João Pedro in many ways and say, look, you've got to come in, but you're going to be battling Alexander Isak. But yeah, the striking options I think are limited for the money Newcastle will have to spend. And I think when you look at priorities on that list, winger, centre-back, goalkeeper, as you've mentioned, then it's a striker. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the way it should be. I think
I think a striker's higher on that list now that Wilson's gone. I would say
now,
I think that striker now, if we're going to put them into an order, I think it goes right winger as top, as it has been for the last 4 years. Then it's a centre-back, and then I would say probably just in a very close third, you've got to go out and get.
See, for me, a new striker's always been pretty much top of the list. So I think right winger this summer succeeds that. But for me, the striker's always been really, really important, as you guys will know on listening to the podcast. But you've mentioned how much money they're going to be spending on other positions.
Just to play devil's advocate and just to, maybe rein in our expectations of how much Newcastle United are gonna be able to spend this summer. Is there an argument, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate because I think they should go out and sign a striker if they can. Will Eddie Howe and his team be looking at it and thinking, you know what, we might have enough here? If Anthony Elanga comes in, Will Asula essentially becomes the third choice right winger / the second choice striker behind Alexander Isak. You've got Sean Neve coming through, very highly rated, a player of that inexperience wouldn't be in and around the first team as much if they didn't think he had a real future. I know he's way obviously off the level of Callum Wilson. Gordon can play through the middle. would the club be sitting here thinking we don't need to replace Callum Wilson if Anthony Elanga comes in on the right?
Potentially, but I would hope not. Because it'd just be rinse and repeat from last season. And again, I go back to what I said. I don't want to see Newcastle United and anyhow being forced to play their best wingers up top. Yes, they can do that. But I don't want to see them do that. Anthony Gordon is best on the left. Anthony Elanga is best on the right. And what we saw at times last season is where, they had to do that, even though players were in form. And we saw it the other way. Jacob Murphy ended up playing right wing back at times. What we want to see in an ideal world is Newcastle United have these options. I know it's a lot easier said than it is done. But no, now Callum Wilson has gone. They've got to look to bring in someone of either real potential or real pedigree as it stands. I think reluctantly they might give Will Sula more game time than they maybe would like. I know we say that, and he's 21. You go, well, how much time has he really got left to reach the levels that we think he can do? This is probably a make or break season in many ways for him. But you mentioned the youngsters there as well. I mean, Eddie Howe doesn't like to really turn to them other than 10, 15 minutes here in the Cups. I mean, he's not going to turn to them in a Champions League campaign, is he? And he's not going to want to have to face those choices either. It's a horrible dilemma. And if there was an open checkbook, we wouldn't be sitting here asking these questions, obviously. But they haven't got an open checkbook, and they need to be very clever in the market. And that, again, speaks to why Dominic Calvert-Lewin is consistently linked.
Well, it's as if you just read my mind there, because I suspect we were going to talk about him later in the episode, but I'm going to put the question to you now. Would it be the worst thing in the world if Dominic Calvert-Lewin signed? And I'm going to also put it to those watching live as well. Please let us know, one, your thoughts on Dominic Calvert-Lewin signing as Callum Wilson's replacement, and two, if not, who comes in?
We have YA Man saying, I would take Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We've got a lot of people saying, please, no. Where was the comment that said, I think it was from Truel, saying he's not the man to bring in. Look, for me, it'd be a massive, massive risk. He actually played more times than people might realize over the last couple of seasons, but he's still plagued by injuries. I think he would be on a big wage as well. Wouldn't break the wage structure, but you were talking at least £100,000. I mean, are you really going to send out one injury-prone striker and replace him with another?
Yeah, very interesting, isn't it? You've got Gary here saying, all I'll say about DCL is that when he's been fit, he's been feeding off scraps at Everton. If the club and Eddie want him, I'll trust the process. Blockhead also said, I'll take DCL on cheap wages. YI Man, DCL a decent signing.
Big Watson says no, rather have a Sula second choice striker. I think this is the other thing, that the club and anyhow have got enough credit in the bank when it comes to transfers. And I say this most weeks, that you trust the process, that you believe that their decisions are going to benefit Newcastle United, and we're going to see a successful Newcastle United. And if that means bringing Dominic Calvert-Lewin in, and that's what Eddie Howe wants to do, that's what Stephen Nixon wants to do, then you go, okay, it's not necessarily something I would do, but you trust the team to make the right decisions, and obviously they would be held accountable if it doesn't work. But it just, again, speaks volumes about the market and just the kind of hoops Newcastle have to jump through to build a squad capable of battling on all four fronts. It's not a job I envy, is it?
Nope. And as we say, if Newcastle United had every other position in order and they were pretty much all set, and all they needed was a nice Callum Wilson replacement, you could go out and sign whoever you wanted. But as we say, they don't have that luxury this summer.
But you see, here's the issue. Stephen says 26 games Dominic Calvert-Lewin played last season. It's not that bad. He won't get more than that at Newcastle. Thomas, though, comes in and says he'll take Wilson's place on the treatment table. So that's the balance. You're battling against kind of two sides of the argument here. But I do think, and I was guilty of this, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin is looked upon as a bit more injury prone than maybe he is. But I still think it would be a risk to bring him in, and for a big, big wage as well. And it's also about, I guess, the feeling, because right now, as we said last week, the feeling around transfers isn't.
I don't think Newcastle's hierarchy or anyhow care about that.
No, they back themselves to get it right.
And I don't think they'll be listening to fan sentiment and taking that on board, just because they haven't signed anyone.
Jeff says, I'd rather get Jonathan Rowe from Marseille. At least gets a younger player on lower wages that could have a sell on value. I suspect after his antics in the European Championships, scoring the winning goal, then he might cost a little bit more. He was linked prior to that competition.
He was at Norwich, wasn't he?
Yeah. Graham says, I would not have Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but it's up to the club, not the fans. Dean says, please don't sign Calvert-Lewin. He's terrible. And Susan says, surely can't be our first signing. Yeah, I would say it's split, but it's not. Aaron's really playing to the crowd here. But there we go. We're going to talk now about Anthony Elanga. At the time of recording, the deal to bring him to Nottingham Forest is still on the table. It's close, but it's not done. I think the reported sell-on fee is causing the issues here. Reported to be 15% that has to be given to Manchester United. So that is a lot of money. It's around
15% of the profit, isn't it? Yeah.
So it'll be about
between 6 to 8 million.
Yeah, so it's still a tiny little bit. And so obviously Forest are going to do their best to get as much as possible. One source said to me, what did you expect? The owner drives a hard bargain. He's not a man that kind of, just gives in. So Newcastle United will be meeting their match when it comes to negotiations there. I also think the other issue, Aaron, is that you've got a very respectful player. He's keen to join Newcastle United to play Champions League football, but he's also not going to rock the boat at Forest. He's not going to go and knock on the door. He's not going to go and do Johan goodbye and refuse to go. He's not going to do an Anthony Gordon kick up a fuss. He's just going to be respectful. If the deal comes off and he's playing Champions League football next season, fantastic. If he's not and he stays at Forest where he's happy, he's got a long contract, where he's excelled, then he's happy as well. And I think that obviously doesn't help Newcastle United in their bid to get into Newcastle United, because what you want in many ways is a player who pushes the agenda.
Do you think?
I think
you want someone who rocks the boat.
It's where it speeds up the deal.
Surely, if that was happening, would we not all be saying, "Well, is he a bad egg?"
Well, that was what I was about to say. I think the fact that he's been respectful and he's not going to rock the boat is something that he will absolutely love. If he's got a tick box about character and attitude, then that's exactly what you want to see. But my point was that if a player wants to come and really make a deal of it,
speeds the process.
Yeah, and he knocks on the door, and you're not going to get that with Elanga. I mean, what's your take on the situation?
Look, I mean, there's obviously frustration. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't. I understand fans' frustration that deals aren't getting done and it's maybe taking a little bit longer. Trust me, the club are working. They're not just sat twiddling their thumbs. Look, I really like Elanga. We spoke about it, especially in the last couple of weeks on this podcast, about how much he would bring to this team. You can debate the fee all day long as to whether it's too much or whatever, but I think, as we've said, in this market, if players like Cunha and Burma are going for over 60 million, I think 55 you probably can't sniff out for Elanga. And yeah, you've just got to hope that the club can finally get one over the line, because as I said last week, I think as soon as they get one through the door, there will be a big sigh of relief, and I think everyone will just be able to calm down a little bit.
People there correcting me on the price that I mentioned. I mentioned 45 million in terms of that's when I've taken off the 15% to Manchester United. Yes, the price at the moment is around 55 million with add-ons. I mean, Forest won 60 million pounds, and I don't think the owner's going to budge on that at all. And as we've said for the last few weeks, they really still hold all the power in this. If Elanga's not going to take the door off its hinges, then it's all about Forest and what they want to do. And if Newcastle want this player through the door, they're going to have to pay what Forest wants. And, if you hit 55 million, they kind of just bite the bullet and say, right, yeah, let's just get it over the line. Here's the extra 5 million add-ons. I mean, you can make those add-ons in many ways is kind of easy to be a reality as it's not. I mean, obviously, we look at the Juventus deal with Lloyd Kelly. I mean, that was kind of a shoo-in that was going to happen, because Juventus will always like to qualify for Europe, whereas you can have add-ons that are kind of hard to become a reality, can't you?
Yeah, like when Anthony Martial joined Manchester United from Monaco, and one of the add-ons or clauses was that Monaco would get 8 million if you won the Ballon d'Or. So, as you say, some are definitely easier to meet than others. I think Newcastle, we know, are trying to structure this deal in a certain ways to not blow, a lot of their budget. And there's a suggestion that, as you say, the sell-on clause of Manchester United only relates to the money that Forest receive up front, which again is obviously going to be a snagging point further down the line. But I suspect if you ask, or you polled a lot of Newcastle United fans and said, well, look, you're already at 55 million, would you pay 60? I think at this point, a lot of them would say, whatever it takes, just get one through the door.
Are you surprised at the reaction? And I mean, not that the reaction is anything new. It's always been split. You know, some think he's great. I mean, I think he's fantastic personally. Others can't see why someone like me absolutely loves him. And obviously, as we're talking about Elanga potentially becoming a Newcastle United player, you see this kind of split more and more.
I think we discussed it last week or the week before, didn't we? That it sort of feels like Anthony Elanga sort of looked down on as a player. I don't think he maybe carries this big reputation. I don't think he carries anywhere near the reputation of Matheus Cunha, of Brian Mbeumo, or any of these players that Newcastle have been linked with. And I think in many ways he's maybe sort of flown under the radar a bit. I mean, his stats for Nottingham Forest in the last 2 seasons have been fantastic. He did not miss a single game last season. His injury record is near perfect, both at Manchester United and at Nottingham Forest. He's very, very quick. He's an international talent. He fits the age profile. We could go on. I mean, he ticks a lot of boxes for Newcastle United. So I think I am probably a little bit surprised by the reaction. But I think if he becomes a Newcastle United player, that soon all gets forgotten about. And I think fans will be excited by it.
I'm very excited about it. I mean, there are also whispers that Forest may try and get Elanga a new deal, but can't see that happening, although I've been wrong before, as people do like to point out. But United are struggling, you know, with these deals to get them over the line. As we said right at the start, it's not time to panic at all. You know, deals that are quick to do just don't seem to be something that Newcastle United are able to do at the moment. Obviously, you've got the Saudi tax, you've got where they're aiming to bring players in from, etc., etc. We have seen other clubs move at breakneck speed. I mean, look at the João Pedro move that Chelsea did, and that was done like that, wasn't it? And again, you could put that down to location of the club, maybe the wages, whatever. But Newcastle United, just at least from the outside, don't seem to be able to get these deals sewn up as quick as other clubs.
Yeah, I think that's what's obviously adding to the frustration that we've seen certainly on social media and from sort of external sources. They're obviously trying to do pretty tricky deals. I mean, as you say, they're not targeting players that want to go. I mean, we all knew that João Pedro would go. Matheus Cunha went to Manchester United with a release clause, so there was little that Wolves could do there. As you say now, Forest are holding out for a lot of money. Burnley have just came up and are trying to navigate this whole window of, look, how do we stay in the Premier League, which is obviously added to the James Trafford situation. But then obviously on the flip side, it does from the outside when you're not privy to the specifics look frustrating because they've pursued James Trafford for a year. Personal terms have been sewn up for absolutely ages. There is obviously that element of frustration that they can't just agree a deal with Burnley. But obviously it isn't just as simple as that. There's a lot of moving parts to it.
Are you worried? Or do you think Newcastle United will be worried that another team could come in and get on Elanga?
No, I think, and I think it was John Gibson on last week's episode that said it best. I'll be panicking on September 1st and not before then. I think they will get the deals done they need to. I think they'll improve Eddie Howe's squad and come back to me on September 1st if they haven't signed anyone, and then I'll be very, very worried. But until then, I'm trying to stay as relaxed as I can about it.
Well, I think this deal gets done within the next week or so. I think it's just a matter of time. And as we've said, despite the noises from some, I think it's a fantastic move for everybody. I've been reading up on him and he's got really good character. He's confident, yeah, he's modest, and he knows he's got more to give. He talks a lot about always looking to improve and to get to the next level, which I think is really, really good. He's also got a recovery suite in his house, which he spends 2 hours at least after every game. And that is commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, but obviously we know that he's not back at Nottingham Forest yet. He won't be back until later this month. He obviously played for Sweden last month, so he's got a little bit of extended leave. As recently as this morning, he's out in Portugal. He's not sunning it up, getting a tan. He's not, drinking or whatever. He is out there with a strength and conditioning coach, with a rehab fitness coach, and with one of his long-term coaches that he used to work out with Manchester United, clearly putting a lot of work in to make sure he's back in, peak physical condition when he does return to Forest or come to Newcastle United in the coming weeks.
Yep, and hopefully we'll get some positive updates in the next few days, and all that hard work he's putting in over in Portugal is to Newcastle United's benefit. Darren says Elanga is good competition for Murphy. Kevin says Forest are happy to sell. Elanga wants to move. Newcastle want to buy. Everything is there. It will get done. It's the deals to agree which might take a few days. Steven says Elanga's mint. He's only behind Salah and Murphy in assists. How will make him so much better, and his pace is electric already. Chemistry with Isak as well. Susan says Elanga is a no-brainer. Synergy with Isak, rapid like Gordon. Isak with room to get better under Howe. I mean, that's the scary front three, isn't it? Gordon, Isak, and Elanga.
Yeah, very, very pacey. Do you want to know a stat that I found out over the weekend?
Come on, then.
Of the top 18 sprints in the Premier League last season, Anthony Elanga registered 6 of them, including the second fastest sprint of the season. And in the top 20, no player had more than one entry on that list, and Elanga had 6.
Well, I think we all remember the goal he scored against Manchester United when he took the ball from just outside his own box all the way up. Lovely finish.
85 metres.
Yeah.
9 seconds.
Unbelievable. But the interview after that he conducted on BT Sport or TNT Sports, and he said, look, I think I'm the fastest player in the Premier League, or one of the fastest players in the Premier League. And if I'm to believe that, then I have to show that on the pitch. And I thought, you know what? He doesn't just talk it. He understands that he can't say these things out, backing it up. I think, again, it just lends itself to this guy having just the right attitude, and he's going to fit perfectly in that dressing room.
Well, he ended that interview, or that quote that you've just mentioned there, after scoring against Forest. Bear in mind, he ran 85 metres in 9 seconds with a football at his feet. Not just as a sprint.
And he shrugged off.
He shrugged off defenders, and then he scored. And he ended that interview by saying, the finish is something I've been working on a lot lately. Left foot or right foot, I'm now quite comfortable with both feet this season.
Look at
what is not to like?
That's the only quote of that interview I didn't mark down. And it's like you knew what I was thinking,
it's
right?
Like Isak and Elanga working together.
Final one on Elanga. I've seen a lot of people comparing Jacobs Murphy's stats to his and pointing out that they're not too dissimilar. But there's a big difference. Elanga's 23, Jacob Murphy is 30. There is time for Elanga to improve and to get better, which he will do under Eddie Howe. I just think people are just looking for any stick to beat Elanga with.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. And yes, his goal scoring stats might not have been very good last season. He only scored 6 in the Premier League out of 38 games, but he did get 11 assists, which was the 3rd highest in the assist table. If anybody's been on social media over the last couple of days, you'll have seen that stat doing the rounds, that he's got more assists in the last 2 seasons than Fernandes of Manchester United, De Bruyne, Saka, Palmer. So it's, the stats are there. You just got to look for them.
Craig's not a fan, though. 3 goals in 20 games. Scary, he says. Craig, honestly, mate, come back to us when he's signed. Yes, time. I bet you'll have his name on the back of all your shirts. Shall we get on to some contract news? I was going to say positive news. I'm not sure too many people will look at it in a positive light. That is the opinion that they're allowed to have, though. John Ruddy has signed a new deal. 30-year-old didn't make an appearance last season for the Magpies, but has had a bit of a mentor role behind the scenes. This deal, Aaron, as I've mentioned there, is not a deal that's making a lot of sense to everybody. Can you shed some light on what the crack is?
Yeah, look, just as we said at the top of the show, Eddie Howe really rates these players that can offer something behind the scenes. And I appreciate it probably won't be a popular deal, but I can see why they've done it. I understand why Eddie Howe's done it. And I think just on Ruddy, he was signed obviously last season not to come and play. He was signed, 1, to act as a mentor to these younger players, 2, to add experience to that dressing room, and 3, to offer guidance to the players around him. And if those are the criteria that he's been judged on, he's met all 3.
There's a 4th.
Is there?
Yeah.
To model dressing
gowns as well.
I thought that might be.
I mean, that's what he's going to be known for, isn't he?
We put the cry out, as we do on social media every week, to get your questions in for the pod. And the first one I saw today was somebody saying, will we get a John Ruddy interview in his dressing gown? So it's good to know that he might not be playing football for Newcastle United, but he's certainly making.
Could you imagine that phone call went? You've got Bruno and Isak in some lovely t-shirts you could be wearing down at the Strawberry, and then someone's gone, John,
do you fancy just getting him?
I mean, it looks a nice dressing gown, to be fair.
Just more on John Ruddy. It's worth pointing out what Eddie Howe said about him last season. When asked about him earlier this year, he said, John has been absolutely brilliant behind the scenes. I can't praise people like John enough. He's came at the football club and fully embraced everything we do. He's here for youth games, he's here for reserve games, and he's really invested in trying to help people. Every player, I am sure he has touched in some way. John has been a vital part of what we've done this year.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed those youngsters who are learning from him get the benefit, and hopefully we might see him as number 1 in the years to come. the question is, what does that mean for the rest of Newcastle United's already oversubscribed goalkeeping department? Bearing in mind, we think James Trafford will be a Newcastle United player within the next few weeks. Nick Pope, Martin Dubravka, Vlachodimos, Mark Gillespie. I mean, one of them, at least one of them has to go, right?
I think personally, if you're asking me now to make a prediction, I think one of them goes, and I suspect it's probably down to between Martin Dubravka and Odysseus Vlachodimos.
They're not going to take the hit on Vlachodimos, are they? PSR.
I think if they can find a loan deal for Vlachodimos, then I think it suits all parties. Dubravka's the interesting one, isn't he? Because if James Trafford comes into the club, Martin Dubravka instantly becomes a third choice. At the age of 36, yes, he's just signed a new deal, which will have no doubt boosted his wages. But is he really going to be happy being third choice? I don't know. I think he could probably stomach staying at Newcastle, knowing that he was a Nick Pope injury away from playing. Now it might be a little bit different.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Away from the pitch, it looks like Newcastle United are moving closer to Paul Mitchell's replacement, with Jason Atheo, formerly of Arsenal, and Ross Wilson, who was a sporting director at Nottingham Forest, all having follow-up interviews for the job. It's also said that the club would like to appoint Darren Eales as replacement, obviously CEO first, but if they find the right man for sporting director, they then will make their move regardless. What's your understanding about what's happening at the moment? Because these are two massive appointments which Newcastle United have to get right.
Yeah, look, the sporting director one is interesting because a lot of the criticism in at the club has been, yes, there's no signings happening, but also there's been sort of no movement. Now, we understand there has been movement behind the scenes at Newcastle about finding a new sporting director, as you've touched on. Their interviews have taken place. And the two men that you've mentioned there, Jason Aito and Ross Wilson, two very different candidates, both very experienced, but you've got Jason Aito, who's been at Arsenal for 10 years and has very much worked his way up and hired a number of roles, whereas Ross Wilson has done big roles, but at a lot of different clubs. He's been at Rangers, he's been at Forest, he's been at Southampton,
Huddersfield.
So he's sort of been around the game a bit more. Now, Ross Wilson, interestingly, has worked with Paul Mitchell before at Southampton. Ross Wilson was very heavily linked with taking the Newcastle United job before Paul Mitchell got it. So there's been a little bit of history there for Ross Wilson. Now, I was speaking to an Arsenal fan the other day to ask about Jason Aito, and he said, if you ask the majority of the fans, they will not have good words to say about Aito because of his transfer record. But I don't think you work your way up like that, and I don't think you're that close to Edu and Mikel Arteta if you haven't got a little bit about you.
Well, I've been speaking to someone about Wilson, and they say the exact opposite about Ross Wilson. Sorry, that's the text coming in now. Well regarded at Forest, people speak highly of him. Not liked by Rangers fans, but Forest have good scouting setup over that he oversees. So, it's going to be interesting actually that if Forest sell Elanga, you watch where they go next, because even if Wilson is at Newcastle by that point or shortly after, it'll still be his fingerprints over Elanga's replacement. I guess that will give a little bit of a hint and suggestion about the approach Newcastle might take. It'll take years to probably build up to that. I think he's been in place since 2023, I think, maybe 2022, but he's not been in there, too long. But I think you do watch how they replace Elanga as a little bit of a nod to how their transfer strategy might look in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think somebody like that is going to be key. Somebody who has a very, very solid recruitment background, just like Paul Mitchell did, just like Dan Ashworth did. So yeah, very interesting to see which path they take with that appointment.
But as I said there, it is so important to get this one right, isn't it? And the CEO. And a bit, I guess, like the stadium decision and the training ground decision and the badge decision, they're such important decisions, for want of a better word, that you can kind of accept a little bit of a delay, I guess. But when it comes to the appointments of actual people in such high profile roles, at the same time, you can understand why there's a real want to get this done and dusted. How quickly would you like to see this all signed off? And I'm including the CEO as well. I mean, because obviously Paul Mitchell's gone, Darren Eales is still there, but we suspect he's probably going to leave. You would think it would make sense before the end of the summer. So they need to get these appointments done, because also we want to see the longevity. And unfortunately for Newcastle United, no fault of their own, they've previous appointments, and I include Downhill's in that, and obviously no one could foresee that he was going to unfortunately get ill. But the long-term plans are being, I wouldn't say they're being rocked, but they're being changed slightly simply because the personnel's been changed. Dan Ashworth, Paul Mitchell, and obviously Darren Neal's going as well.
Yeah, look, for a club that wants to be number one and wants to be best at absolutely everything, changing sporting directors every 2 seasons, changing CEOs isn't obviously on the cards. As you said there, nobody could have foreseen Darren Neal's going when he did, but his replacement needs to be in it for the long haul. And now they've interviewed some really high profile candidates for that job as well. And I think that's just as important. But I think just on the sporting director, and you obviously asking me how quick I would like to see it wrapped up. I mean, ridiculously quickly. We're in the middle of a transfer window, and Newcastle are seemingly really struggling to get deals over the line. They're now without a sporting director in that role. And yes, they've promoted people from within for the time being, but it would be very, very good to see, a sporting director come in as soon as feasibly possible. Now, the only issue we've got, obviously, is Paul Mitchell came in last summer and made a very big deal about how tricky it is to join midway through a transfer window. So you've got to hope that it's a smooth transition.
You know what? Didn't even crop into my head that if they get someone, they'd be joining at a similar time.
Pretty much bang on the same.
I wonder in that instance whether they would appoint someone and just say, well, we're there. Why don't you just take a step back? We'll trust Andy Howe. We'll trust Steve
look,
Nixon.
I mean, the transfer plans have been in the works for months. Newcastle United know the players they want to sign. I'm not saying for a minute it's going to be Jason Ato or Ross Wilson coming in and saying, look, I think Newcastle United should sign these players. I'm sure they'll have their own ideas. But I don't think it will see a huge diversion from what Newcastle United have already got in the works at the minute anyway.
Are you surprised that they've not gone back in for Dougie Freedman, who they wanted?
Look, he was very, very highly rated, wasn't he, at Palace? He's now gone to
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, he's in Saudi at the minute. So, yeah, look, I'm not too sure about Dougie Freedman.
Well, one to watch. I suspect that everything will happen when we're both on holiday or all at the same time. We've also got an appointment in terms of a set piece coach, Aaron. Martin Mark. The advert for this role went live a few months ago, and they've got the man. What do we know about him, and how important do you think getting someone in to oversee all this is for Newcastle?
Yeah, look, it's huge. It's a massive, huge business in the Premier League, as you've probably seen if you've watched any Arsenal Villa game in the last couple of months, where you see their set piece coach frantically waving their arms
around.
He's got a
mural, the Arsenal guy, hasn't he?
Exactly, yeah. As I say, it's become a big business. A lot of Premier League clubs are doing it. Brentford laid the groundwork for it years ago, and have sort of set the standards ever since. On the new appointment, he's coming in from Danish side Midtjylland, who have had a huge track record of success with these type of coaches. It's massively important part of the game over there, so it'll be very, very interesting to see how he comes over. But I think, as we've just alluded to there, Newcastle want it to be the best at everything. I think, fans might not care, but I think signings of these nature actually do make a difference, because Newcastle are trying to get, every drop out of what they can, and every place in the Premier League matters. And these set piece coaches have proven to work. So I'm just surprised it's taken them as long to do it as it.
Do you know how many goals they scored from set pieces last season?
Newcastle?
Yeah.
They scored 12, I believe.
Do you know who was top? And with how many?
No.
You've got 19 teams. Take a guess.
Oh, sorry, which club was top?
Which club, sorry.
Sorry, I thought you meant which player. Which club was top? I'll go for... God, I don't know.
We've talked about them a lot in this episode.
Forest.
Yeah, 17. It's not a huge difference.
Yeah.
Of course, it's enough goals to make a difference. But yeah, it could be very exciting appointment, and hopefully he does so well that, like the Arsenal chap, he gets a flag or a mural to pay tribute to him. Season tickets been a slight change, and it's got a lot of attention. I'll just read out the bullet point, Aaron, and then get your take on it. Your season ticket shall not be eligible for renewal and shall be terminated for the subsequent season if your season ticket has been unused for 5 individual matches in the season. These need not be consecutive. Your season ticket shall be determined as having been used for the season if you have met any of the following criteria, etc., etc. Basically, The gist of that is that if you miss 5 individual matches in a season, your season ticket will not be renewed. You can give it back to the club to be resold for a game, or transfer it to the relevant app, and sticking to the rules with that. I mean, it seems fair. Like, some people have kicked it before us, but
I think it seems
right,
fair. I mean, the big point of it is to stop empty seats at games, isn't it? And I think that's the thing. And the ticket can still obviously be used, transferred, resold. So it's not as if, fans are going to be missing out. It's actually probably offering an opportunity for more fans who probably can't get to games to actually go and see the football club. So I don't see the big issue with it. I think obviously maybe why some fans have taken a little bit of issue is that it wasn't communicated. It was just sort of snuck out, and not the club obviously didn't really make a big sum.
Who reads the terms and conditions?
Well,
anyway?
exactly. So it probably is good for some fans that it's came to light, because I suspect some of them, if they hadn't seen it, they've missed 5 games next
season, holidays and what
yeah.
have you. We'll get into some questions then, just to wrap up. Sam Mulner, co-host of the show, is talking about Elanga. He says Forest linked with Fofana from Lyon to replace Elanga would be a very shrewd buy indeed. I mean, Sam's not a big fan of Elanga.
He's very edgy, Sam. He likes a good foreign signing. That.
Well, he's still crying because Everton have been linked to Kubu, which he wants to happen in Newcastle. We've got Novo saying if was asking about is James Bunt staying, which he is. He came in with Mitchell, has worked with him before, and he says I'm more bothered about him staying than worrying about Mitchell leaving. And as far as we're aware, James Bunt is going absolutely nowhere, which is fantastic news for Newcastle United.
Yeah, really, really good impact he had last season after coming obviously to try and fix the injury problem of the year before. And as you said, there's been no suggestion that he will follow Mitchell out the door either.
Christian says, hi, with everyone fit, do you think it's likely how drops Burn for Botman? Burn seems to be an Eddie favourite, and rightly so, and how rarely drops his favourites. Last season we played with 3 at the back when everyone was fit. I'm thinking that was to accommodate them both rather than a tactical approach. I like Everton at home on the final game of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting, wasn't it? I think Botman, we did see last season, could play on the right, but he's obviously naturally a left-sided centre-back, which would obviously point to the fact Burn would go. Then if you say that Newcastle United are going to go out and sign a new centre-back on the right, then we could be seeing a brand new partnership. I sort of hope we don't see that 3 at the back formation going forward every game, because I think it works in some games, not in others, as we probably saw in the last game of the season. But yeah, look, Burn could quite easily become the backup.
He's arguably player of the season. So can you drop him for the first few weeks of the season? I don't know if you can.
No, I don't think you can in the first couple of seasons, but I think he will have hopefully, all being well, Botman stays fit and really does challenge him for it. But, I think Cher and Burn will both fancy their chances of keeping them their spots.
I think Cher is more at risk.
Yeah, he's more vulnerable, I think, than Burn, definitely.
But that's for the new right-sided centre-back.
To challenge him.
Do you know what, though?
Well, I mean, is there anything... I mean, look, again, is there anything to suggest it couldn't be Botman and Burn? With Botman on the right?
Left-sided. It's interesting, I mean, you could also argue, Burn, the season he has, he'll want to continue playing, he'll back himself, but the argument might be, well, actually, go out on a high, maybe.
Could we ever see Dan Burn at left back again if Lewis Hall gets injured?
No, I'll be Tino's place, wouldn't it? We've got Anthony saying, are we actually looking at Ruben Neves? Really do need to make 5 or 6 signings this transfer window. I've not seen that link.
I haven't seen that link.
Sorry.
That feels like he's
time traveling.
He's been stuck in a
good player.
Ago, if I'm honest, I haven't seen anything about Ruben Neves.
But midfield not really a priority at the moment. I mean, you got Lewis Miley and you got other players hopefully in the youth ranks that can come through as well and potentially make a difference. Last question then, Aaron. What's the next week hold?
I don't like to make predictions like this because they always come back to bite us. So I'll just keep it really, really safe, as I always do. No, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna sit my chest out. By the time we're doing this Monday show next week, we'll be talking about a brand new signing. Big
Watson says, and he said this repeatedly, 3 or 4 questions. I've not been ignoring you. I've just been saving it until the end. Questions need to be asked about people doing these deals for players and how we can't get them over the line. He, in that question, therefore, was critical about what has happened so far. But it's not for the want of trying, is it? You know, it's not as simple as picking up the phone and saying, we want Elanga, here's the money. You've got to make the best value. You've got to negotiate. You know, you spend X, Y, Z here, you can't go out and spend it on another player. Hence the reason they walked away from Burmo, because the wages were too much. You said last week, you know, they've been proactive. They've just hit stumbling block after stumbling block. That's not necessarily the fault of anyone, is it?
No, and that's the sort of reason I keep saying that I'm not getting too worried yet, because they are being proactive. They are trying to get deals done. They are sort of working slightly with one hand behind the back, in the sense that they don't have a sporting director in place at the minute. I would be a lot more worried if, you know, they weren't making deals and they were holding off, or they were looking like they weren't going to sign anyone, which obviously they're not.
My concern will maybe grow a little bit once they get on the flight to Korea.
No.
Yeah, I think they've got to have one person on board, haven't they? I mean, they're going to have lots of people on board the plane, but I mean, a new signing.
Yeah, look at an ideal world, yes, but look, I've just said it. Next Monday we'll be sat here.
Hopefully, everyone watching and listening didn't listen to your Brian and Burmo prediction a few weeks ago.
I was actually at the gym the other day, and a mate of mine came up with me and said, Brian and Burmo, 23rd of June, and just started laughing. I was like, well,
at least he's watching.
At least he's watching. But yes, I did get ridiculed about that.
Well, thank you very much to everyone who has tuned in. More than 4,300 people tuning in right now live, which is unbelievable. And thank you to everyone who watches later, listens later. Your time is much appreciated. We'll have plenty of podcasts coming later this week, including Sam Milner's dream transfer window. So get ready for that, ladies and gents. I'm sure that'll be filled with names you've probably never heard of, who will turn out to be stars, and then his ego gets inflated even more. We'll have Gibbo back later in the week as well. Do enjoy the sunshine, which is starting to peek through the clouds. Stay safe out there. Thank you very much for tuning in.